gentlemen, to another episode of the Three Wise Guys podcast. It's your boy Arya. I'm here with Luke. I'm here with Delapo. Davin's all the way in the back. Wiggle your fingers in front of the cam. Do something. Yeah, there you go. How you boys doing? We just got back from Niagara Falls, actually. Literally like an hour ago.
Yeah.
So everyone has car legs. Just fair warning in advance. Car legs, sea legs from fucking drinking yesterday.
True.
We did a wine tour. That was quite fun.
I feel like I got a lot more tired. Like when we got back home before we went out for dinner, I was like, whoa, I didn't expect it to hit me this much.
I think the main topic we were trying to figure out at dinner is like, how old are we getting really? Luke, you and Alyssa did a good job of rallying. I think you guys were really down for it. And then you looked at the other half of the table and everyone was like, yeah, no, I think we want to go home. I think we want to go home. I think we're done with this right now.
Oh, context, because we're supposed to do, so we did the wine tours. It was like, 1 to 4 p.m. Then we had dinner reservations for 8:30. 8? For 8. And then the plan was to go to the casino after dinner. Right? And so what Arya is pointing out,
this is planned like a month in advance, 2 months in advance,
like a month or two in advance, honestly. Yeah. So like I remember this was like in August when we were in New York. That was when we planned this. Well, that's when I brought up the idea, and then Sunday and Michelle actually planned it along with you. But yeah, and so what happened was we came back from the wine tour. We're all fucking tired of shit, and then we go for dinner. And then at the dinner table, we're like, okay, so Luke and Alyssa are like, all right, so what's the plan for the casino? Like, are we still trying to do this? And everyone's just kind of like looking around. I don't know. I wasn't involved in the conversation. I think me and Ogo or me and Steph were talking, and it's almost like, D, you're trying to go. Oh, we're not trying to go to the casino. Do you want to? I was like, nah, I'm straight. I'm like,
don't go nowhere.
I'm not going nowhere.
I felt actually sick after all the wine throughout the day. Yeah. I did not feel good. I think it was just a lack of food. Yeah, but I did not expect that. I thought we would be fine. You know, they just give you like a few sips of wine. You know, nothing crazy. We had some cheese too.
Yeah,
but no, but I felt better after the food. But still, I just wanted to sleep. I think we're getting old.
Yeah, honestly, I'm not convinced that like any point in life like we could ever drink for a whole day. Cause like even like I don't know like even in university when you like day drink like Panda Game and stuff like I felt like that was like you drink from like 9 a.m. to like 1 and then you KO for like 6 hours and then you wake up at like 8
and then you're ready to go again.
Like not knowing where in the world you are, but like we're just not like inclined now to like do the second half of the activity, I guess.
No.
The second half was go home, watch the fight, watch Kill Bill.
Great movie.
And like no one, maybe 2 people actually stayed until the end of the movie. Like me and Michelle. Shout out Michelle. And then that was it.
Yeah. I think only Luke watched the fight.
Yeah. I watched only the last fight too. Like I was in bed, like Alyssa was asleep. I was just like watching it on my phone. And then like I actually like. So I was like, fuck, like this fight is not as entertaining without like sound. So I went to the bathroom and I watched the rest of it. I went to the bathroom and
what life are we living?
What happened to your AirPods?
I didn't want to like rustle around and find it and wake her, so I was like, fuck. Okay, so I just anyway, I went to the bathroom.
I don't know, like what do you think would have made more noise? Like closing the door, getting out of bed.
Three Wise Guys topics on the pod now are just how old we've gotten and how to live a domesticated lifestyle. You can't rustle for shit in the middle of the night at the risk of waking up the person next to you.
It's like it's also like I don't know, like it's like one of those things where like when you go on a trip like this with a big group, it's very liberating because it's like, I know you were like, we planned this a month ahead. Like I did nothing. And I didn't really know the itinerary. Like I didn't know we were going to 4 wineries. I didn't know we were going to a casino or whatever, but I was like, yeah, like I'm down for it. And it's like, it's nice, you know, to have like a group.
That's how I feel on every trip. How was it to feel that way this time?
Oh, great! Like I was like, fuck. Also, like Alyssa didn't have to drive, and I was like, this is a rarity for me. Like 0 responsibility, and just show up.
I think we should take turns moving forward.
What do you mean, Arya?
I was planning this week this trip.
No, okay. See, so you remind me of my girlfriend.
Why?
You're one of those people that say you want others to plan, but then when others start planning, you just butt in like every 5 seconds.
So by the way, I want to point out one of our friends. So the person you're describing is actually one of our friends. I feel like I should stop saying names.
Yeah,
that's like probably not the nicest thing to do. But that's who you're describing. She calls me one evening. She's like, "We need to plan dinner." I was like, "Okay." She's like, "Can you call me?" And I was like, "Okay." And we ended up getting on a phone for like an hour and a half near the end of the night, and it ended with me just saying, ChatGPT is going to figure this out for us. So we actually, by the way, this is a huge ding to ChatGPT. ChatGPT planned our dinner.
Oh, did it?
Yeah. I asked for a full analysis of different restaurants in the neighborhood, reviews, menu, price. I wanted a specific vibe, blah, 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 this is that. And it suggested Carpaccio in Niagara Falls on Lundy's Lane. And it was pretty underwhelming.
Yeah.
It was pretty underwhelming. We really didn't like it.
Again, it was one of those things where for Niagara Falls, it seemed relatively busy. Okay. It seemed like they had like big groups.
Yep.
It seemed like a spot, like my little cousin who lives there, he went there and knew like 2 different people. Like, you know,
shit. I didn't even know that.
Yeah, he knew the person serving us played soccer with him. And then like the family that was in the glass, you know, that place.
I noticed he was talking to them.
He was talking to them. He helped them take pictures. Yeah, so he played soccer with one of the kids and knew the parents. I think it was like 3 generations, grandparents, parents, and then the kids. Okay. So he knew them. So I was like, okay, I guess this is like a spot, maybe. Like, yeah, I guess that you go there and you find people that you know. So maybe Niagara Falls, that is a spot. And he seemed to like the food because I asked him. He had no complaints.
I mean, yeah. What do you have? Spaghetti?
You got the chicken parm.
Chicken parm.
Oh, the chicken parm with spaghetti.
With spaghetti.
Yeah.
The chicken parm was
It's hard to fuck up a spaghetti, don't you think?
Spaghetti was like, you know, it was nothing special, man. And I got bolognese too, and it just tasted like tomato sauce with some beef in it.
I was excited to have a steak because when we were at the wine tour, someone said this wine goes really well with a nice juicy steak, and that's all I was thinking about for the rest of the day. I want a steak for dinner.
No,
dude, I'm like, I feel like at this point, like unless I'm going to a steakhouse, like I never
get a steak,
ever order a steak, just because like I think like a steak is pretty easy to cook. Like I think all of us can cook a good steak. It's not hard, right? Like, and it's like, I don't know. I feel you. I that makes sense though, because I was looking it up. That restaurant has good reviews on Google.
Really good reviews.
And like GPT, the number one like thing it does when you ask it for like best recommendations is it looks through aggregators. So it'll look through like Yelp and Google Business and Bing Business and like all this shit, and like that's their source. Like they don't always like go direct to Google, from what I understand. So like it makes sense why they picked it, but.
I won't lie to, like, I think it was in our Uber, me as an Uber. It was like, you and your girl were like, at some point you were like, okay, now that we're out of the restaurant, let's talk about how shit it was. That's not what they said. That was not what they said, but that was what was implied and what followed. And like, our little cousin's in the front, he's in the front. In my head, I was like, fuck. He's probably like, these fucking Toronto snobs come to our best restaurant and just shit on it the whole day.
It's true.
That was like an intrusive thought I had, but I was like, hey, well, like at least he knows there's a different standard to things. Niagara Falls is not the standard.
Okay, first of all, like I think I very rarely say food is bad.
Yeah.
Like when was the besides this last experience, when was the last time I said something was like bad? Like I feel like
you generally don't say it's bad. You're highly critical of food, but I understand why, and rightfully so, because you cook really well.
Yeah,
I will.
You know what I mean?
Say, like I feel like you usually experiment with your orders.
True.
You're never gonna go like
that's fair.
You go to
tried and true. Tried and true does not exist with your vocabulary.
Like you're always like, oh, I want to try. So like you are critical and you might say, oh, they'll do. But like I don't think I've ever seen you not finish a meal, and you didn't finish a meal. Your meal
that's I
didn't.
Yeah, I very rarely don't do that, and I don't know, because for me it's like I think food is very subjective, so it's just my take on things, and then also like. I don't know what it is. It's just like, okay, first of all, I agree. I don't usually try the tried and true, but I think tried and true is like for
It's too mainstream.
Mainstream
media fucked the tried and true.
Okay, this might sound like
I have, this is a steakhouse. Let's go get the fish.
it's possible. It's fully possible. Like you're not wrong. But like my belief is I want like this is gonna sound insanely pretentious, but like I have tried and true foods I like at the restaurants I go to more than like a few times. Yeah. So like Hachi, even though it's not like the most like it's not like the greatest Korean restaurant like in Toronto at all. No. But there's like when I go there, I kind of know like, oh, I'm gonna get the potato pancake and I'm gonna get the soup. Okay. Like I know what I like there, right?
Bulgogi?
Yeah, no, but like
I get the bulgogi.
Okay, I was gonna say I get the bulgogi.
I come to that conclusion, right? Like I try different things, and I'm like, it's almost like I'm trying to find my try and true. So when I go to like a new restaurant, I'm like, anyway, I get you, but yeah. My one thing is like I don't understand why in these cities, because it's like again, food is subjective, but it's like I genuinely believe like some like my mark for that stuff is like if a chain restaurant makes better food than you and you're a specialty restaurant,
I remember this.
I like that's something that's concerning for me. You know what I mean? Because it's like, and again, it's still my opinion. People might love carpaccio, but like for example, I've like people who know me know like I genuinely like Scatterbush. Like it's a chain. It's a chain restaurant.
Love Scatterbush. Shout out Scatterbush.
Dude, I think
Suncor makes good restaurants. Actually, I'm not even gonna lie.
Yeah, Jack Astor's. I think pretty good food.
Loose Moose, Jack Astor's, Scatta.
They have like some like good concepts and like Scatterbush. I think is fucking delicious, man. Like every time I go to Scatterbush, I'm like it's at least a 7.5 out of 10 minimum. Like I get something I don't.
The pasta's fresh. They actually make it themselves. Yeah.
The plates are beautiful. Like the atmosphere is nice. Like all that stuff.
Davin had a point. Davin, you can speak up whenever you want.
I was just gonna say like if a restaurant is good, all the dishes should be good.
Not even like a one-off. What if it's just they tried with this one?
I don't know. I come with like growing up with my dad as a chef, so I'm like with Luke on being critical about dishes.
Yeah. This guy's spoiled.
I'm saying, like, look at these Asians with chefs as parents.
What's up with you guys?
Fucking like, man? Or grandpas that fucking like, you know, I'm here just happy someone's feeding me.
Because I think there's like a.
Well, I guess I'm at like the base of the needs pyramid. I'm just happy to be fed. I can't be critical.
But I think ironically though, at the lowest level and the highest level, it's actually the same thing.
Okay. Huh?
Like at like the most basic, like I want to eat to be nourished, and the highest level of like food is almost the same. But like I think in Asian culture, it might just be because like food is like the way a lot of Asian cultures express like together time and love and all that shit. So it's like important, but. I agree. Like, I think there's a difference between like not liking a dish and thinking the quality and the technique on the dish is bad. You know what I mean? Like, you can have a dish and be like for example, the calamari yesterday, I'm like, I think it was cooked pretty well, but it wasn't for me. You know what I mean? Like someone that likes that type of like more like grilled type of texture, like they would probably enjoy it. Fair. I think technically it's a good dish, but it's like I don't like it.
I was thrown off by the sweet chili sauce on the plate. That was kind of insane.
That was insane.
We're at an Italian restaurant. Where's the aioli, man?
Yeah, no, it was Costco sweet chili.
Literally Costco sweet chili sauce.
Yes, that was insane.
At an Italian, how much was the plate? Like $19?
Something like that.
Yeah, that's insane. No, don't ever do that to me again.
Yeah, no.
Anyway, how did you guys like the actual wine tour? Because
the wine tour is great.
We spent most of the time shitting on this.
Wine tour is great. Flat Rock. I have a new appreciation for Flat Rock Winery. I think that was the only one that I actually really liked. The last one was kind of nice too. But Flat Rock was real cool. The guy who took us around was real cool. I don't know if you guys knew this. I've never done a wine tour before. That was my very first one.
Neither have I.
Really?
Yeah, that was my very first one. So I didn't know what to expect. I think I kind of overestimated myself a little bit because I see people going on wine tours. I'm like, how crazy can it be? You know, they're giving you a little bit of wine inside the glass, you know. You go get a few of them, but it adds up to maybe one glass everywhere you go. Yeah. There's no way, you know what I mean? There's no way. But they don't account for the fact that, okay, the first time you walk around and, you know, there's sun beaming down on you, you know what I mean? And then it takes a while and you're not eating during this time either, right? And you're just sitting in a car, driving 15 minutes each way. Time is burning. No calories are burning. You go sit down again. You just drink more. You're laughing. You're having a good time. Before you know it, you've had like 6 or 7 glasses of wine
Dude, we had 16 glasses of wine.
Yeah, no, 16 samples.
yeah.
I'm saying, like, let's say you've had 6 or 7 full glasses within a span of like 2 hours.
Yeah, probably.
You know what I mean? And I think with no food, you know, you're just chilling, like that'll do it for me.
Yeah.
And that did it for me pretty. Like at the beginning, I was like, oh, this is easy, no problem. I'm glad we did the walking tour at the beginning.
Yeah. Now after the second one, I was like, oh, okay. Like I think that's when I was like, okay, I'm at like a 4 now. Like I'm not sober. Whatever. And Steph was talking shit the whole time. But anyways, that's besides the point. Yeah, no, really enjoyed.
We have to give it to Steph on this show, by the way. I'm not drinking any of the last ones.
Did you guys like wine, like going into this?
Yeah.
And so, did you guys like learn something new out of it?
Oh yeah, I feel like I was the least knowledgeable about wine. Like if I'm being completely honest, like I'd rather like even in the house now, I've just kind of been like I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just gonna drink beer. Or like I know like a pale ale, I know an amber, and I know a lager.
What's the easiest guy thing I can drink?
Yeah, like I mean, it's like you know what I mean.
Man, shit.
Sure, but then like going there, like I'm listening to like hearing about Pinots. There's a lot of stuff about Pinots and like, you know, keeping the skins in. And apparently like, you know, like I guess white wine is the same red grapes. It's just with the skins peeled off. It's like,
It's
okay,
not green grapes.
like, it's not green grapes, you know? So like, you know, learning about that, learning about what the gravity versus like the pump. And then they were talking about like the 3 different types of grapes. Like Riesling is a type of grape. I thought that was just a type of wine. And like, you know, how like, oh, like, wines have, you know, like you hear sommeliers like talk about the flavors in wines. I thought that was all bullshit, if I'm being completely honest. But then you get there and they tell you to spin it and to smell it, and you actually, the most vivid one was the one that smelled like gasoline.
Yeah, the Riesling.
Like, yeah, was it a Riesling? Yeah. I remember like that hit me and I was like, this smells like gasoline. And they were like, yeah, no, it does smell like that. And like, okay, yeah, you could smell ones with like the pepper as well as, and like the fruity, super fruity smells. And it's like, oh, like no, people aren't just talking shit. Like there's different smells to that. So that was really cool, and like learning about that and like the Chardonnays and talking about how dry it is versus like, you know, like fruity. And they're talking about old world wines being like more like, you know, minerally, and like new world being more fruity. And then like, yeah, the cool part as well was like just the climate stuff when they were talking about microclimates and like, you know, the Flat Rock place that Ari was talking about was the vineyard is on like a slab of like limestone, and they're talking about how that, you know, like gives their wine. Dude was talking to shit about like their wine being the best, and we went to 4 different wineries and it was the best.
By far the best.
Like not so close.
Not
and he was just like, he was really talking about how, yeah, they get minerals, they plant radishes as a cover crop to make sure like the nutrients of the plants are still there. So that was great. And then, yeah, like the climates and stuff, like there was like microclimates, and they're able to measure like, you know, composition of the soil and all this stuff. And like, it gets technical, and they had a lab. So we did see the lab in Flat Rock. They had a lab in their winery where they calculate all this stuff. And he's telling me there's like software that they use to track all this data. And like, you know, apps, he told me the app that they use and stuff like that. And I think that winery was 100% sustainable.
The most sustainable, whatever it was.
The most sustainable. It's powered by geothermal energy. Like, you know, like in Niagara here, like Niagara escarpment. So like, it's like insane to see the amount of detail. And yeah, I just rattled off a bunch of stuff.
Dolapo heard data and geeked out a little bit. But yeah, that's essentially what happened.
Sorry.
To his point too, I think I learned less about the taste and everything. I still think that's kind of like whatever. Like some people have the palate, some people don't. Like you can kind of make stuff up, and if you're an influential person, people will believe you. I don't really care. But it was I think the mechanics behind it, the operation of a winery, that was brand new to me, and I thought that was insanely cool. Just kind of the different way, like the whole gravity thing. I didn't know that that's kind of such a superior way to make wine. I thought everywhere you go, like, oh yeah, it goes into a barrel, and then you suck it into another barrel, and then you suck it into a 3rd and 4th barrel, and you do different things in each of the barrels, and then it ends up in a wooden barrel, right? That was like my entire understanding of wine up until this weekend. But the guy at the Flat Rock was funny. I think at one point he said, you know, if a bottle of wine is more than $60, it's a fugazi. You know what I mean? It doesn't need to be more than that.
He said rarity.
You're paying for rarity and brand at that globally. No, you said globally.
No,
Yeah, he said globally. He's like,
I think he might.
I think he said in Ontario.
Maybe he said
I
Ontario.
don't know.
'Cause
I thought he was speaking generally, and he was just like any bottle of wine that you get that's over $60. He said in the LCBO, but that's the only place
he
where
said
you
in
can
the
get
LCBO.
liquor.
Yeah,
right?
he said in the. But I think I
took it as general.
I took it similar to you in the sense where he's like the max. Like he was just trying to say like in terms of quality of wine. $60, like that's expensive. Everything else is just their brand and like how rare their wine is. That's what you're
the
paying
reason
for.
why I thought that was funny. I don't know if you guys noticed, but at the front of their winery, one of the first things they see, you have an $80 bottle of wine just sitting there.
No,
It is a rarity thing, though, right?
It's
I think
a
that was
rarity thing, I guess.
like those
Yeah.
their vintages and stuff that they have. I'm sure they'll sell it for more.
Yeah.
Go.
No, I mean, like, yeah, like really fascinating. Like for me, like, cause I've been on I think 2 wine tours, and like I feel like it's so interesting because like the ones I did were like you drive in yourself. So we did a tour at every winery. Like last year when I went, we did 3 tours.
Okay.
So I thought like I actually liked the tasting, and like going forward, I don't think I actually want to tour like every winery because not every like we went to see Peller and like it was way less cool than Flat Rock. Like I would have preferred to not tour Peller. To
And
be
they all
honest.
kind of work the same after a certain point, anyways, right?
Well, not
Like you
really.
see a
'cause,
couple
like,
different styles, and it's like, what else? How different can it really be?
Well, think about the drip style in like Flat Rock versus the last one, right? The last place was also a drip style, but it was like if we did a tour, they would have taken us like to the back and shown us, and like it was kind of a different like vibe. But like all this to say, like a couple of interesting things because I went to an all natural winery last year too, but they had a different methodology for like keeping away crows, and they were not on the bend. So I think like they have to harvest earlier because remember yesterday he was saying like they don't have to worry about crows and stuff because by the time they migrate here, they've already harvested.
Yes, that's very
so
true.
it's like they have to harvest at a later season because of the temperature difference. And they were explaining to me how they grow all these accessory fruits on the property so that birds go and eat those fruits. And they have to like trim their vineyards at like a certain height. And that's like just 2 wineries in the same location. And then we were talking to Ed, our driver. He was like,
Eddie, shout out
BC, like they actually have to water grapes, which is like
they do,
which is crazy, which is like
sandy.
so rare. Like it wouldn't
because it was the ending of a big desert.
He said there's a desert
zone.
there,
It ended right there, so they just don't get enough water, and it's all sandy.
It's all sandy, super porous, and so it flows in. No, it's you're right. It's incredible. I was gonna say Flat Rock and the last one, I forget Malivore.
Malinois.
Malivore.
No, Malinois is a type of dog.
No, it was Toss.
Malivore.
Toss was the second last.
Sorry. So
Tawes was the second last. Tawes was a place with a really nice house.
Yeah, so it's Toss I'm thinking about. Toss and Flat Rock, they're both the ones with gravity. They were both the ones with gravity, gravity, whatever it was. Because they both seemed pretty similar in vibe. They talked about the same things. I was like, they were talking about like, French oak. I remember it was like French oak is the barrels that they store their wine. Like she was going off about French oak as well.
It takes longer for French oak to mature than it does for American oak to mature. Like the rings are much closer together. It was kind of cool, actually.
Yeah, they're going.
The last one was also gravity.
Oh, it was also gravity.
She showed us there was like the 2 like barrel things. She like it's kind of like a waterfall flows down.
Yes, she did say
we were
that.
outside, but she just pointed it out.
I think Trav as well, because I asked her, I was like, oh, so this is like gravity fed, and she's like, they don't do all gravity fed anymore. Because apparently they actually like don't grow all their grapes. They actually import grapes to like work with. Oh, so also a couple interesting things I found about like the Ontario thing was like last year I learned like Ontario is one of the only places for ice wine, and apparently like when you see VQA on your like wine bottles, that means like at least 80% of the grapes in that bottle was like grown in Ontario.
What does VQA stand for?
It's like
verified quality assurance.
Yeah, I see it on Ontario wines only.
Yeah.
And
VQA.
I think it's called VQA. I might be wrong.
No, that's ChatGPT is taking us through AI viral questioning answering. No, in wine,
No, it might be VQA.
No. It was a VQA Ontario wine.
Yeah. But go ahead, sorry.
But yeah, like it was interesting to learn that like even within like the small area of Niagara, there's like 4 or 5 different climates, and like that's because I wonder like there's probably same agricultural consequences for other things. You know what I mean? Like grapes are probably much more temperament based, but like I wonder with like other expensive goods, like let's say like expensive chocolate or like expensive, you know, like coffee, like what is it that makes that stuff expensive, right? Like we now know with grapes, it's like
good branding.
So like if you guys remember, it was
Vintners Quality Alliance.
Yeah.
Is vintner like a vintner like a person who makes wine? Or an organization that makes wine?
I probably really misremembered the labels.
It means the wine is 100% Ontario.
Oh, 100%. Okay, sorry.
Oh, nice.
100%.
Okay. So VQA just means completely everything's in Ontario. Produced, grown,
Ontario.
everything's in Ontario.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I was gonna just to your point in terms of just like the quality. I remember they were talking about the Gamay.
Yeah.
The Gamay grapes made in Burgundy and they what Bourgeois or Beaujolais?
Beaujolais.
Beaujolais.
Yeah.
Beaujolais is the type of wine. And then they were saying, like in certain areas of France, like in Burgundy, you're only allowed to grow Gamay.
Yeah.
You're not allowed to Gamay grapes. You're not allowed to grow anything else. So I would imagine like the quality of the soil, the mineral content, like of that type of soil for wines grown there, you know, it might make it more expensive than like, you know, like your typical like, you know, Gamay grown here in Ontario or somewhere else. I don't know. I'm just assuming like, you know, like if you grow different crops on the same patch of soil versus like, you know, just one crop on that patch of soil, I'd like to think there might be, you know, differences in the quality, and I might be talking shit. And you know, the dude was also talking about growing. In Flat Rock, they only grow 2 tons of grape on their property.
Oh yeah,
Right.
And they were saying like the $10 wine from LCBO, they're probably growing 22 tons.
It was in Australia. Like
Yeah,
in Australia,
he was
growing like 22 tons for the season or whatever it was.
per acre.
Per acre.
Yeah, something
and
like
that's
that.
why they were able to create so much wine, and therefore the unit economics just brought it down.
It just makes it so so I feel like those kind of things would
factors into
factor
price.
into the
Ooh,
quality.
that's true. Because like a machine like picked vineyard is probably grown differently, so that the machines can go through and like
That's
everything was hand picked.
Yeah.
That's another thing that he mentioned too at Flat Rock Alleys. Everything that we had was completely hand picked. Like the whole winery was hand picked, which I thought was pretty insane.
Yeah. No, I think it's pretty cool.
Before we wrap up the wine thing, I actually wanted to say something else, which was like a while ago, I was like on a YouTube rabbit hole and I was like looking into like so there's like qualifications to become master sommeliers.
Okay.
And I don't know exactly the qualification criteria, but one of the tests, and like this sounds insane to me because it's like, I'm just going to say this out loud. Like, I don't see how it's possible that anyone gets this like certification. Apparently, like they just give you like 3 or a couple different glasses of wine and you have to tell them the year of the wine. You have to tell them where it's grown and you have to tell them the specific type of wine. So like they'll give you like a Pinot Noir and you have to tell them what year it was grown, like the vintage. You have to tell them where in the world it is from, and then you have to tell them the type of wine it is. Like, but it's like out of infinite choices. So it's like, how is it even
You have to
at
just
that
be
point,
drinking
right?
so much wine all the time.
That's
you have to be a
blows my
true
mind.
sommelier. Like you have to know wine in and out. And
Okay,
I don't think I'll ever get to that point.
I'm gonna talk out of my ass here for a bit, like more than I usually do.
Yeah.
Like as someone,
That's impossible.
Yeah. As someone that often considered the most difficult section, that's a blind tasting. Candidates must identify wines by taste alone. Using a deductive method, they describe and evaluate 6 wines, usually 3 whites and 3 reds, over 25 minutes. They're expected to accurately identify the wine's grape variety, country of origin, region, vintage, and style based purely on sensory evaluation.
Also, some of these wines can be blends.
Really?
They can give you like a noir, like a Gamay blend, and you have to be like, it's a noir Gamay blend. Like that's.
Will they give you
that's just-
points if you identify one grape?
Probably
I don't know.
not.
Like it just seems like how
Probably
does
not. They
anyone
seem a
pass
bit
this
uppity.
test? Like
What I was gonna bring up, my talking out of my ass thought was like most exams. Oh, the exam has an extremely low pass rate. Okay, yeah, fair. Like I feel like like you get exams, you go study like the past exams.
Yeah.
And like I'm sure if you get like maybe like 100 years
you're like,
of sommelier, like you'll see some patterns in the wines that are used for the blind tasting. So this is me using a brute force method to hack through an exam, which has been what I've done for most of my life. What do you want to say, Art?
No, sorry, I yawned.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And now that we have cameras, I can't necessarily just yawn on camera like that.
that would be my way to like hack through that. But like, who knows if there's like, how are you gonna get the 100 years of past exams? So like, I don't know. But
I get what you mean. Maybe you look at like what wines were chosen for the past 100 years, and you find out like, oh, more often than not, like 1 out of the 3 wines is a Riesling.
Yes.
And then you're like, oh, I can definitely identify Rieslings, but I don't know how to identify this white wine. So then if I go through all of the ones and it's none of the ones I know, then I'm pretty sure it's like one of
these,
the three or something like that, maybe. Like,
and you get, I'm just saying, make it a data game where you're given 6 wines. If I get 3 of them, okay, Riesling, there's only a Riesling grape. Okay, so like, I want to master Riesling, and then Pinot. Like, I don't know, I'm just talking, but like, yeah, it's hard as fuck.
I'm proposing
I'm sure
our next Three Wise Guys episode. We're gonna have a blind taste test. I'm gonna bring 4. I'm gonna bring one for each of us. I'm gonna bring 4 little tasters, and we're each gonna have to guess what kind of wine it is.
there's no chance.
No chance. Okay,
do it
It'll
for
be
fun,
great
for the
content, though.
audience.
Even if you did it where like you pick 4 liquids that we drink frequently, like for example, if you did like
I was gonna put
4
peanut butter
different,
on one of the
like,
cups.
Jeez, okay, like, all right, moving on.
I think if you gave me like 3 cheap whiskeys and one of them is JP Weiser, I can probably tell which one is JP Weiser.
Okay, Luke can
But I
do,
drink it
Luke
more
can do
often.
whiskeys. What can you do?
Nothing.
Like teas, maybe.
Teas.
But teas
I
taste
can
so
do-
Actually, yeah,
different.
Delapa
They
can do
taste so
We
teas.
should do it
Teas taste so
personalized.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Davin,
yeah,
what can you do? What do you got?
Broccoli.
Broccoli? Did you just say broccoli?
It's a safe
Wait, we
word.
can't do teas though, 'cause
Okay, safe word, broccoli. Okay, great.
Okay, all right.
Everyone knows what we're talking about, but okay.
Oh, I get it.
Wow.
Okay.
Everyone except
I'm sorry, I'm very slow.
It took me a
Very,
second.
very slow. Very, very,
Oh,
very,
geez.
very
It
slow.
took me
I'm
a
sorry.
second.
Oh, jeez.
Just realized, sorry.
Broccoli is like rapini.
I was like, are we gonna get
Chinese broccoli?
I was like, do we go get broccoli from different stores and you guess the store?
Oh my god, yeah. Okay. Yeah, at least me and Davin were insane.
I can do sodas. I can do colas.
Okay, but
We gotta do Coke, Pepsi. Who was you were the one that was
yeah, like-
Diet
Diet
Coke,
Coke,
Zero Coke.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like cola.
RC Cola, like President's
Fanta
Choice
versus Crush.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
that-
Fanta versus
Okay, but you
Crush.
can't do teas where you do like black tea versus green tea versus peppermint. You have to get like 4 types of peppermint tea.
I'll bring a few different types.
Okay, like I mean, like how many peppermint tea brands do
Like
I know?
Orange Pico.
Okay.
Earl Grey.
Okay,
Like London Fog.
I could definitely do that. I could definitely do that.
Chamomile.
Yeah,
Can we do the
chamomile.
episode after next? Because I think I'm running the Toronto Marathon next episode.
Okay, yeah, okay, we're
We
recording.
need to
this.
find a
This is
replacement for
episode,
Luke
yeah.
next episode.
No, that's good.
Okay.
But yeah, I was gonna say, excuse me. Like I know one of the wineries we went to was pretty cool because they were brothers. It was a family business, and the property they'd had since like the 1800s. They had their family tombstones like on there. They had a deed
Yeah.
from King George.
Ah.
Like granting them the house. Like I don't know like when King George lived, but like
This is like looking generational wealth in the eyes.
yes, like literally, and like
Deep in the blue eyes.
yeah, and their twin boys were just like, I guess we don't want to work, so we're just gonna turn our cousin's house into a winery and charge people for tours.
He's like, my cousin lives, like, the living room is right there, that's like, through that door.
Yeah, no, which is insane. But like I say that to like talk through like generational wealth from the 1800s. Like in their case, like I guess it was cool. We actually don't know anything about their ancestors who were gifted the land. But for example, if like their ancestors were Confederate soldiers or slave owners, right? And like they did that in the past and they accumulated a decent amount of wealth. Like, like by the way, the property was like a lakefront view. Like,
It was
like
beautiful.
like lakefront property.
Beautiful.
It was like all the other. It wasn't
You can
as
see
nice.
Toronto.
Yeah.
You,
Yeah,
can,
you can
you
see
go down by the
Toronto.
water, you can see Toronto
Yeah,
all the way in the distance.
Literally. Oh yeah. By the way, where we were was like the bench, the Niagara Escarpment. So it's like the direct other side of the Golden Horseshoe. So you can like from a decent amount of the wineries, you could see Toronto like on the other side, like within the view. So absolutely incredible. But all of this to say, like yeah, like that property was passed down like hundreds of years, like at least 100 years.
They had dead relatives buried on site.
On site, yes, on site, on the property.
They had tombstones.
Tombstone on the site. So like that's how old this was, and they were passed down that property, right? So like we don't know what their parents did, right, to get that, but like I'm just saying, like for example,
Makes
like,
you think. That's
yeah,
it.
it makes you think. There's other people who have wealth, like generational wealth, just like that, with like fucking country estates, like like passed down, and like art, like works of art, like, you know what I mean, like passed down, and like in cars, like, you know, like the first edition Rolls Royce, or like, you know, like a carriage, like passed down, right? And maybe their ancestors did some morally questionable things, right? So I guess my question to you guys would be like, do you judge the grandkids, the descendants, for like, you know, like holding on to the privilege and enjoying the privilege that their ancestors got, like, you know, like from like maybe morally like sketchy stuff? So like a very vivid example, my ancestor was a slave owner, and he amassed a lot of wealth, like here in Ontario, like, you know, country homes. He started a company, and like we've kept this company in the family for like 100 years, and like we're millionaires. Like we've been millionaires for 100 years over, and we're gonna be millionaires for the next 50 years. And like the way they got this wealth was off the back of slaves. Like, so now the kid is like, you know, one of the grandchildren or one of the descendants is like our age or maybe in his 40s, and like, you know, like he's a trust fund baby. Like he's a kid, and like he chills. Other than that, he's down to earth. Like he's cool. Like, do we blame him? Is he a shitty person? Like, is he supposed to sell off his family's wealth? Like, do we still blame him for the harm his ancestors inflicted, or is he cool? Go.
I'll say even more relatable example. Any single one of us living in Canada or the US, right? Are we, because we're benefiting from an erasure of people that once lived here prior to colonizers, right? So how much responsibility should we carry on our backs for that as well? Like, how much guilt should we carry? I think it's a very valid question.
Yeah.
I mean, you either agree with it. Sorry, I didn't even make a point to agree with or not. But you're either on one side of that or you're on the other. I think one side will definitely promise a life of existential dread, and the other a bit more of blissful ignorance. But I think that's probably a more relatable example that we can talk about in a bit more detail.
More relatable because, yeah, I remember, at least, I don't know if you've done this on the pod, we've had conversations about that indigenous land acknowledgement and stuff like that. And does that really do anything? You know, but like, I don't know. That's not the one specifically I want to go into. And then just like, is there any way to earn that? Like, is there any way to like, okay, like, no, you're forgiven now for the sins of your father or for the sins of your ancestors. And like, we don't put that on you anymore because you're not. And just like a counter example to keep in mind. And this question has been going on for 5 minutes now. But like, I feel like if your ancestors were rich slave owners and like all the money was lost before it got to you, like,
are you absolved?
Like, are you absolved? I feel like I personally would be like,
because you're broke.
Yeah,
it's hard enough being broke. Are you absolved now?
Like, basically, like, I mean, you have to like hustle the same way I have to. Like, your parents were like, you know, middle class. Like, you're not enjoying any of that slave owner privilege. Like, do you get what I mean? Like, like how do you navigate that? But yeah, question done. Like, I'll open it up. Like, how do you guys feel about that?
I'm like, I don't want to be the first person to talk about this. You know?
I can try.
Okay,
go for it.
Let's go down.
Yeah.
So I feel like personally, I would be able to look past it if this person was just generally a good person. Like, they weren't using their privilege to like a certain advantage or whatnot. And if anything, they acknowledge it. And I think that acknowledgement could be just between themselves.
Okay.
And it doesn't have to be announced to me. I'm just trying to think in my position, if I were in the same shoes, I wouldn't want to have to prove myself to anyone, but I still would like to lead with my best foot forward.
Yeah.
I think you're right, and I think it's especially tough. Think about it. Let's say, you know, in the case of, you know, like a former slave owner family, you know, passed down and everything like that. Not everybody in the society you're around today was affected by the things that your family did in a negative way. That makes sense. So the people that you're seeking absolution from might not have any right to even give you any, right? So to what extent does society have a right to hold that over someone when there's a big chunk of the population that had there was no bearing on their life from those actions in the past? Does that make sense what I'm saying?
It does.
This is just to kind of open this conversation up a little bit. I'm like, we're in a very complicated, complex society now, right? That has lots of different actors in it.
you can't like easily draw a line to be like this person's family did these things, and thus to absolve their sins they need to do these things.
Right. Like me, as just like as someone, like my parents were immigrants who came here, right? If I'm talking to someone whose family made, like in your example, made money off the backs of all these slaves and everything like that, like what moral bearing do I have as the child of immigrants in Canada to hold that against them, right? Like what position am I in to do that to them? I may not agree with what their family did, right? But on the principle of the basis, like what can I say? What can I honestly say to them?
Do you have something to say?
Like I have like kind of, this isn't like a super formulated thought, but I feel like my general feelings about this is like, it's kind of like the Kevin Spacey thing in the sense of like, there isn't a true definitive answer. It's a PR thing. Like it's opinions, and there's going to be people on both sides of the opinion. And I don't think it's true for any of us to sit here and be like, this person has to do this, or they don't have to do this, or they are guilty X, Y, and Z. The way I think about this sometimes is like, it's very, I have a pretty complicated way of looking at this because maybe from my background, but like when you think about it, right? Like these are, I don't want to say these are problems that are unique to the first world, but these same problems don't really exist in the third world, right? Like you don't really like in China, there isn't really conversations about like the people who are super rich right now, how did they get their money? And like, do they need to spread that wealth among everyone else, right? Like that's not like a conversation that happens. The other thing that's interesting is like you talk, like let's isolate that slave point. Like first of all, like slaves were not like, it wasn't white people that went to Africa and enslaved slaves. That wasn't what happened, right? Like there were African tribes that sold slaves off to Europeans, and then those were brought over to North America. It's an uncomfortable thought to have, but it's like, even at that, whose fault is it? Is it those tribes? Is it the Europeans? I don't know.
Kind of all of them. There's so much blame to give.
Exactly. So it's like, let's say we're trying to pay retribution for that situation. Who has to pay retribution? Is it the tribes?
Everyone.
Is it the Europeans? We know one group of people has been harmed, but we don't like, you know what I mean? The path to resolution is so unclear. And like, I guess the way I think about it is like, let's say you think about like China, right? There's been so many atrocities that have happened in the history of China. And there's actually like, there's been times in China where this was a thing. Like there was this idea of collective responsibility. And if I did something wrong, my whole family could be killed. And that was like a thing, a collective responsibility thing. These things actually existed in certain cultures. In India, it's very common where like there are certain families who are still paying for the faults, quote unquote, of their like past, right? So it's like one of those things where like that actually already exists. And if you ask those people, they'll tell you it's purely political. Why does China like have this, like why they don't do this anymore, but they used to. Why did they used to do this? It was for political control. The government will say it's to accept group responsibility and all those things, but in that isolated thing, it was for political control. So that's my opinion here as well. It's a politics thing. It's an opinion thing, right? Like the reality is there isn't an objective, in my opinion, like there isn't an objective like state here. You can't be like, this person's right, this person's wrong. I don't know. Like, I don't know how to
I'll also add, I just generally think that you should not be cast judgment by the decisions of your ancestors. I'm not going to do that to people, and I would expect people not to do that to me. I don't even know half my fucking history, if I'm being honest with you. So I don't know if my guys have probably done some stupid shit, you know, I don't know. I just don't know. Right. So if I were to cast judgment, who knows what someone could find out about me. Right.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, we're in the 21st century. It's okay. So I might say something. It might be a little bit controversial. Right.
Okay.
But it might be a good example to draw. Right. Because we get a lot. Well, I am in conversations with people a lot about global political events. Right. So the Israel-Palestine thing that's going on right now. Right. And one of the most common questions I get, and I'll talk to people who are on one side of the argument, on the other.
Yep.
One comment I generally get is, why do people care about this so much? Like, why is this so impactful? This has happened so many times in history, right? And it has, like people have come, they've conquered, they've conquered. Yep. It's the entire reason why we have a house here in North America, right? Like, this is nothing new. But why is it so important, and why do people feel so strong? And I feel strongly about it. You know what I mean? Why do I feel strongly about it? And it's pretty simple. It's just we're living through it. And that's kind of what it is. You're in the moment, you're going to have a stronger reaction to it. when things are in the past, you generally get to pick and choose based off of other environmental factors. Whatever someone is telling you, whatever someone influential is saying. We don't think about the pillaging that happened in East Asia in the, the 15th, 16th, 17th century, right? Because it has no bearing on our lives today, right? Or even the transfer of land in that same part of Israel that happened over the past several thousands of years, over and constantly all over again. We don't think about that because that happened well before we were here. We think about it today, and for good reason. You know what I mean? If it's happening today, it's in front of you, you feel strongly about it, you are absolutely allowed to feel a way about it and act and hold your position. But I think that generally translates to why we might, or at least I might feel that I don't necessarily think we need to hold things against people for what their ancestors have done. It was in a completely different time. What am I supposed to do about that? Yeah. This person is not supposed to, does not deserve a life because of that. I don't necessarily think that's true.
I wanna bring two things in because I like how this is going. I like that you brought the war up because I wanted to bring that up a little bit, but like I don't want to go too deep into that. And like first off, David is just you're such a great person. Like what a great response. But
I had the cleanest response out of all of them.
The cleanest, but like two things. Number one,
we'll corrupt you yet again, don't we?
Yeah, for sure. Number one, that whole thing where you're like, oh, we're living through it now. Like you say that because like obviously for the conflict, like you're invested in that. And, like I would argue that Black people still feel like they're living through the effects of slavery and racism, right? Institutionalized racism. Still, George Floyd, BLM, we're 3-4 years ago away from that. Like I'm part of organizations that still champion that and say, oh, like this is institutionalized. So I would argue people are still living through that. Like, with BLM. Like, and I was going to say, like, there's other conflicts as well, like, where, like, the people that were directly involved, like, in Palestine. Like, for me, I remember when we were having, I'm like, dude, this is, like, years ago. Like, one of the people should let go. Like, they haven't been here, but you're like, no, they have a claim. And I'm like, ugh. Like, did you... Similar
same thing.
Like, it's the duality. It's the duality. So, like, in that one, and then you're like, who are you to have something to say? And then I'm like, well, if you're an ally of the people that are being directly involved, like if I'm your ally, I'm more likely to defend your position, even if I was not directly affected. So like in that sense, I want to challenge that point and say, no, there are still people today that will, have strong opinions, like the Indians in the indigenous people. Sorry, that was the indigenous people in Canada. Like
the mic still picked it up.
My apologies. No, but like very, very powerful. I remember like one of the big things when I was coming into Canada in high school, like I read about like books on the plight of them, and insane. But like there are people still in reservations,
still to this
day, like talking through. Hey, indigenous reconciliation. I was seeing like there's like $2 billion lawsuits won by indigenous groups against the government of Canada still in 2024 for stuff that happened in 1800. And so like people are still living through this, and they can't just be like, oh, I'm gonna forgive their ancestors. So that's one thing. Two, the path to reconciliation. That's what you mentioned. And that, like, more than, oh, what's the right way? What's the wrong way? I feel like that's the most important part. Like,
solution oriented.
Being solution oriented. Like, what is the path to reconciliation? Like, how many more lawsuits, or like, just as an example, is the Canadian government going to have to pay out? Like you said, this doesn't happen in Nigeria. Like in China. In Nigeria, it absolutely happens, where we still blame colonization for a bunch of stuff, and haven't necessarily taken as much responsibility as I personally feel like we should have taken. Do you get what I mean? To help like go on that, like we're still looking like to the West to pay back, for all the wrong that they've done, like with interest. In fact, do you get what I mean? So like there's still that. Hey, like you need to pay. Same thing with the African Americans and Black people in the U.S. They're still looking for retribution with preferential admissions and like DEI, like that's also a form of retribution. And so like yes, like all of that's happening, but like still, what is this path to reconciliation that is inclusive of everybody, because people have issues with DEI. I'm sure there's some people that have issues with like indigenous lawsuit awards still
Absolutely,
being
yeah.
awarded $2 billion ones for two completely separate things here, and like and on and on and on. So those are the two things where there's still people that are hurt and still feel that hurt in Palestine, in like, you know, the indigenous reservations. And then two, what's that path to reconciliation? And we don't have to answer this because this is a huge topic, but
It's fine. I great points, and you're absolutely right. I think just to kind of clarify my point, I think I meant more so just kind of the act that had happened has came and gone, right?
come and gone.
I think the people who are affected, they're the only ones who really have any right to feel any certain type of way, right? And they're the ones who ultimately should be guiding our path to reconciliation.
Fair.
And you know how, depending on how much of an ally you are, you're going to support that.
Yeah.
Essentially, that's I feel like that rounds that off pretty well too.
Yeah, I actually like, so like I think like to address the duality plus the what's the path to retribution, I think it's actually like, I might paraphrase what you're saying a little bit. I think it is up to the parties to determine the path to retribution, and it's continual action that results in the retribution, because retribution isn't like a certain point in time. There's continual actions that continue to happen, right? So it's an ongoing process, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So like, for example, like earlier I was basically talking about how like there isn't an objective truth to either side. So it's just like think about this statement, right? Like, isn't it crazy that the good guys won every single time in history? Well, that's because like the winners get to decide the narrative.
Absolutely.
But the losers are still valid to push their narrative, and they continue to do so.
Yep.
And if they receive more support, they become the winners, right?
Yep.
It's like what we were talking about with clean energy.
Yep.
We can't just go out and say clean energy is the way to go. Everyone should invest in it. We actually have to make it make sense to people.
Absolutely.
That is our responsibility. And I think that is the point. The
That's
reason
kind of
why
what's happening right now in Palestine and Israel, right?
because there isn't a definitive answer, both parties feel strongly, and they are both valid. Like earlier you were talking about like, oh, like the you know, Africans still feel slighted. But in our conversations, and like correct me if I'm wrong, but like, isn't it, there's also internal conflict within the African community.
Absolutely.
Some people feel that they hold too much onto the past. Some people feel that the path forward is, you know, to reconcile and continue instead of holding back. So there's divide even in that, right? And I think that's exactly what it is. Like every single one of those opinions is actually valid. It's up to those people to communicate it in a way to garner support and hopefully like have change, right? It's just unfortunate. Like now we're in a time where there's so much information. The spread of information is also extremely easy. So I think it's hard for anyone to be like in the past there were like big evils and big problems, but now there's like thousands of like issues that all matter. Like they all matter. And
I was gonna say to your point about, you know, like the narrative building, having access to more information is making that possible. Right. So think about like the past, you know, 60, 70 years, right? Like the conflict in the Middle East, the victors wrote history. Right. Not much of a buzz was created about it. Not too many, you know, activists were spurred as a result. It was all very much contained. Now you can put that either on the availability of information, or you can just put that on the narrative itself, right? The people who had information has been available. Globalization is a new concept, but not new in the sense that it wasn't here, or it didn't at least begin 50, 60, 70 years ago. You know what I mean? We had moments of it. Now we're in this information age where, you know, the other side of it that may have lost that initial battle, that initial war, they have the power to voice their narrative. And people can now decide which narrative they really want to be a part of and have access to. I think it's been a really important thing. Like we talk a lot of shit about the information age. It does create a lot of headaches, but for the sake of, I mean, how cliche would it be? For the sake of democracy, for the sake of just kind of humanity, to be able to have a narrative given to people who did not win these massive moments in history, I think is so important.
Yeah,
I totally agree, and also have points that I disagree with. And I also kind of want to use this to kind of end this topic, because giving people a narrative is very important, but it's extremely dangerous. Okay, like I think there's a duality to giving people a narrative, because one, then the blame game never ends, and the reconciliation is you know continues forever, and then you know the best part is, hey, like you were valid in your, it's like validating their feelings even though they lost. like is the benefit of giving people a narrative. So like I do think there's a double-edged sword there, and then the question is how do you balance that? And right, I would ask us personally, hey, we've had conflicts, right? So how do we balance respecting the past and giving the past its just due, but also leaving that alone and moving forward in the future? And I'm gonna give an example, right? Because African Americans, I believe, are still kind of stuck.
Okay.
Right? Okay. Like, I don't know. I don't want to speak on the Palestinian situation, but
Just speak to yours. Yeah.
like what's it called? Africans as well. At least not all countries, but a decent amount of African countries are also still kind of stuck. You know what I mean? 60 years later, 100 years later, right? People are still stuck in terms of getting reconciliation. And then I don't know too much about this, but I don't know. Like people don't kind of call Germans Nazis anymore. I feel like
They've
all
gone over it.
like we've all completely forgiven the Germans. I think the Jews as well. I don't know, just from an outsider looking in perspective that knows very little about this. So correct me. Like, you know, the Germans, fine. They were a powerhouse in the world. Everyone's still looking to Germany. Like, how were they able to navigate that reconciliation? Like, I just as an example, because I feel like there's ways of doing things that make everybody feel good, but there's ways of doing things that actually move everybody forward. And like, I want us to relate this to us personally as well, because like Luke and I just had a tiff.
I had a funny example. Like I actually was going to bring that
talk
up.
about your argument.
Example, yeah.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I think you had something to say, so I don't want to.
I think you brought up the German thing, and I think my answer to this whole thing was, or at least one perspective of it, I think the perpetrator side of this, right or wrong in history, right? If you want to kind of reconcile perspectives on a conflict, Germans did a great job after the fact of marketing themselves and putting themselves out as anti whatever was going on, right? There was a huge push and a huge effort on their own side to correct this wrongful situation. And I think that's a huge part in any conflict. Yeah. If you want to be able to move past it, it needs to be both sides. Obviously, the side that was slighted, they got a UN resolution. We'll talk about this another day, but that somehow created another conflict. Yeah. But the perpetrator side also had their own internal resolution and how they wanted to change the image of their country moving forward. So on both sides, everyone kind of got a win-win situation. It required third-party arbitration, blah, blah, blah. But if you're asking why do we not see Germany as Nazis, is because they did a really good job of reconciling their country image after the fact.
They owned the Nazi. Like they were like, we did do this.
We did this.
This was terrible.
This is awful.
And they actually like, I've never been to Germany, but the few Germans I've met on exchange, they're like, this is like heavily ingrained into their history. Like lessons, like when they're growing up, they're like, this happened. This is exactly how it happened. And this is like why there was unchecked corruption. Like there was actually a famous, I think, test that came out through this study that showed like, if with authority, 10 perfectly reasonable people can have extreme ideologies over the course of just 7 days. So like it's super heavily ingrained. So relating it funnily in a way to our argument earlier.
Can you give the audience context of the argument?
So before this podcast, D and I got into an argument because D was like, I don't know where my beanies are. And he was like, and I wore one of his beanies in the past 2 weeks. And he was like, do you know where you put it? And I was like, I don't think I put it anywhere. And he was like, if you did misplace it, would you remember? And then I kind of counter with, well, like, if I said I would remember, would you believe me? Anyway, if we got into an argument, right? Why did I calm down? Because I was sitting here and I was like, you know what? Like, this topic that we're talking about, the beanies, one of the beanies we're talking about is a beanie I gave you. Yep. And why did I give it to you? Because you're my friend and you're my roommate and I love you, right? Yes. That's why I gave you that beanie. This beanie is completely irrelevant. The reason why we're arguing is because I care about your opinion of me. Right. Okay. But in that thought, I can also think, and this is like the self-responsibility and acceptance part relating it to Germany. I can also accept that all the things I said before this conversation are true, but it can also be true that what you said is true. And if it is, that's fine. Like, you know what I mean? Both of those things can exist in the same field And then the most important thing
Path to
is like,
reconciliation.
now let's move towards the path to reconciliation, which is we go and look for it. If we don't find it, well, let's go and
buy
get
new beanies.
You know what I mean? Like
Absolutely.
that's actually the solution here, right?
Yeah, that is.
Because if I didn't like at least sit here and be like, okay, well, what I said was valid. What he said is also valid. And like, it's true. There's a history of this example, which is why it's true. Then I can't move beyond that, right? Because then I'm just hyper fixating that I'm right. Because like the reality, I think in a lot of these situations, is like both parties are
fixating
probably
on the
correct.
fact that they're right.
Yeah.
Oh, that's such a great one too.
Ego
It's
death.
ego.
Ego
Yeah.
death. Ego death is so important in
No,
so
but
many
sorry,
walks of
go
your
ahead.
life.
I just the hyper fixation on
that's-
you're right
yeah.
is really where like the Africans are getting it wrong versus the like people like you know what I mean versus and also like the Nigerians, sorry, African Americans, like black people, they have a fixation on hey, you guys need to acknowledge this and like do whatever, and also like Africans just being like no colonialism. What you want to?
Right and wrong is so tough to navigate from a foreign policy perspective, not because it doesn't exist on a global scale. Right and wrong does exist, just because you're dealing with in general conflicts. You're dealing with two probably very large populations of people, each with their own very unique and very nuanced perspectives. And although one side may feel very strongly about it, the other side feels just as strongly about their perspective. And you can't resolve global conflicts or foreign policy through an argument of right and wrong. You have to do it through a method of reconciliation, a method of anointment. What do you want? What can I do to make this right? That now we both agree on what's right.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? We don't necessarily have to agree on who was right or who was wrong in the past. If that happens, it's very effective. That's why you see that's what happened with Germany. They were able to say that, hey, I'm wrong, right? And you saw how effective that is because almost 100 years later, right? You're like, oh, you don't even know Germany did anything that bad, unless you're reading about history.
Yeah,
right.
Honestly,
Unless you're reading about history, you don't even know that it happened.
I didn't even. I remember, and this might be more on me and less on the Nigerian education system. But like, I knew about Nazis. I just didn't know they were German. And I didn't know
were
like
all Nazis German? I don't know.
no, that like Austrian and like stuff like that. Like
It was
that
a
area.
German party.
Yeah,
right.
yeah,
And
German party.
yes, they had allies and sympathists in other nations.
But all of that to
that's
say,
that's
I
a
just,
German party, yeah.
what was it called?
Huh?
Sorry, I'm trying to think of the name of the Jew, the Nazis going against the Jews. What was
The Holocaust.
the Holocaust? Sorry, yeah. I'm just saying. I'm so
What
sorry.
was it again?
No, like
What was it when they killed? What was it like? Insane. We've been talking about it for 15 minutes, D.
I forget the general name, the way it's labeled. But yeah, I was just gonna say like I didn't learn as much about that like growing up in history and like in schools back home, and that might have just been like where I was and not like an aspersions on the Nigerian education system. I don't know, and maybe we do need to.
It's
call
okay.
that
You
out.
can asperse a little bit.
Maybe we do need to fix
Fix
that.
up, man.
Yeah, but yeah. So like all of that to say, you don't know about it, and it doesn't become a thing. However, like I guess coming back till today to what we're talking about, if the great grandson of Wilfrid Laurier is speaking to a kid off of an indigenous reservation, and he says, "Oh, hi, my name is Donald Laurier," and they're like, "Laurier, like, are you related to Wilfrid Laurier?" And he's like, "Yeah, that's actually like my great grandfather." And he's like, "Fuck you," like goes off. Then how do they both reconcile? Because at the end of the day, that's what matters.
Purely and simply, none of us can tell that individual indigenous person how to feel. They can feel however they want, right? In most cases, reconciliation does require arbitrage.
Yeah.
You do need a third party. You need someone who's not as emotionally attached to the situation to be able to kind of make sure things move smoothly. So
if you were Wilfrid Laurier's great grandson, how'd you navigate that scenario?
I mean, I don't think
including
society, but again, to finish my point,
Okay.
I don't think society should necessarily withhold opportunities from these people, right? Because society is not just made up of the affected folks. And I think that's what my original point was as well. It's an amalgamation of many different perspectives. We are in a modern, complex society, and we shouldn't withhold opportunities from people who have had these nasty connections in their past because they didn't ask to be born, right? And that's all I'm saying. An indigenous person can feel however they want, and I will never tell them how to feel about Wilfrid Laurier's grandson, their bloodline. They can insult their bloodline, they can curse their bloodline, they can do whatever you want. I'm never going to be in a position to tell you otherwise, because my family has not seen the hurt that you've seen as a result of that. You know what I mean? So who am I? And that's why I said earlier, who am I really to make that decision, right? But on an overall scale, on a societal scale, they're integrated with society. They are another cog in a machine that needs to work, that needs to live, that needs to reproduce, and do all that stuff.
To me, like it's like two separate things. Because like I definitely agree. Like someone's history, especially like the history of their family, should probably not pay an impact on their ability to do a job, right? I think for me, like,
or to be your friend.
Yeah, for me, like friendships and jobs, it's up to the individual company, and like it's based on ability. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, like even friendships, right? It's based on like mutual interest, whatever. It doesn't matter. But on the native and the Wilfrid Laurier one, I was like, well, if first, like, how do they resolve it? The reason they can't resolve it is because neither parties are willing to accept the other person's perspective. Because, like, if you were to ask that person who feels super strongly about that, what the resolution is, their resolution is probably going to be more extreme in comparison to another native person who has a different opinion. So I was like thinking about this conflict me and you had. What if there was 500 Lukes and 500 Delapos that made up the Luke and Delapo as a whole that had this argument? Well, there would be Lukes within that group of 500 that would be much more extreme about their feelings and be like, no, it doesn't matter. I am right. And there will be Lukes within that group that are more willing to give. Those two people have different resolutions, right? Yeah. So it's like, even between those two, they could maybe come to a resolution. Maybe the native guy's like, I want this. And then Laurier's like, I understand why you want that. Can you also give that? If I give you this, it's now going to disturb my quality of life. Okay, maybe I can give you that. I still want some sort of resolution. What about this? Is this reasonable? That can happen, right? But what happens when you bring in like 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 other people? Now it's not a unified opinion, right? Which
now you have now you have a government cabinet, and you have people who want a hand in the cookie jar, and people who have money on the line, and that's why we can't have any resolution in Canada anytime.
But I'm gonna say something wild. Maybe this is like how we like resolve things. Like, what if one of the ways we resolve these conflicts in the future is like you just take people's brains and their opinions, and then you unify it almost into like a collective AI. And then you use that.
When you said
this is crazy. Like, I was like, where are you stupid? This is not crazy.
We haven't even smoked yet today.
Like, let's say you took all of them, and then now this is like a unified AI that took in the perspectives of all the different parties. And then that unified AI communicates with another unified AI that takes in all the considerations of the other. I don't know, maybe.
And then you like communicate, and that would be the third party intermediary.
That's like making the 500 Lukes into one Luke. You know what I don't know.
It's kind of like GPT-4o doing the whole chain of thought thing. Yeah. Like they're basically running a GPT prompt through GPT to give better reasoning. Yeah. It's like
Luke is saying take GPT and speak with all 500 Lukes. And take their opinion and based off of that come with like a set of
GPT like L. And then GPT-4 talks to 500
Delapos and comes with the list of demands of all the Delapos, and then GPT Delapo and GPT Luke now figure out how to make actual Delapo and actual Luke.
Maybe it's even happening in real time. Like there's feedback, and then it's like, hey, now this the GPT Delapo has come back with this. How do you feel about it? I type, but then all other 500 Lukes also type. I don't know.
So the solution is AI. Great.
I don't know. Like it's stupid.
Solution is always AI. And we're at time.
Most 2024 resolution ever.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for tuning in to a spirited conversation of the Three Wise Guys. We will be doing blind taste tests, probably not next episode, the episode after, but before we go, everyone wish a very good luck to Luke, who is running the Toronto Marathon next week or in 2 weeks from now.
I think.
You think?
I think.
All right.
You think you're
It's either 2 weeks or 3 weeks. I don't know. I think
okay, so he's either going to be on the next episode or he's not.
Yeah. And if he is, then we'll wish him good luck that episode. But if he's not,
Let's
let's
just
wish him
start
luck.
wishing him luck.
Every time you see Luke for the next 3 weeks, be like, hey, good luck, man. Good luck, man. Break a leg, not literally. Anyways, until next time, one love.
One love.
Mwah.